Welcome to Patchworx Brewing. I'm Patrick. Today I'm going to show you how to make a yeast starter. Basically, for a yeast starter you need yeast, dry malt extract, sanitizer. I like to use alcohol as well because this is instant sanitation. A device or a container to make the starter in. I use a 2-liter flask that I made a stir plate for. I also use yeast nutrient. You don't need this is optional, but if you do use it, it'll just help ensure better yeast production and growth. A pot to boil it in, and obviously a stove. So everybody that thinks you can just spray Star San on stuff and it instantly sanitizes it. See right here where it says it must remain on the surface for at least 1 minute to sanitize. That's why I like the alcohol. So I've realized I've been telling you to use alcohol, or if you want to use it, and not telling you how I make the alcohol. You want your alcohol to be around 75 to 80% of alcohol by weight. So what I do is I just go to the store, I buy the 91% and I dilute it down. I talked to a head brewer to a great brewery, and they spray all their stuff with alcohol, of course flush it, but it just instantly sterilizes anything in your brewing system. So I just use this and I dilute it 90% alcohol to 10% water. That brings it down to the level you need to bring it within range to where it's effective and you're not doing overkilling with the alcohol. So just thought I'd throw that in there. Also, I forgot to mention you need a funnel. So when you take the cold wort out and put it in the flask, you need a funnel to transfer it. So if you don't, it's a real big pain in the butt. Okay, so we're going to start the yeast starter off. So I'm making a 1.5 liter starter, well, 1600 milliliters, a little over 1.5, because I'm doing an 11-gallon batch of beer. So this starter, I usually would do a 2-liter starter to get more yeast cells out of the starter, but this one here I'm doing a little bit smaller because I'm doing a German beer. And you want to underpitch those beers a little bit. But anyways, we're going to start this off by dumping this water, just tap water, into the pot. Of course, we want to turn the burner on. And we're going to let this kind of heat up and get going, then we'll add the dry malt extract. So the water's been heating for a couple minutes here. I want to talk about the dry malt extract. So I used 6 ounces of dry malt extract by weight for this 1.5 liter starter. Usually you want to do about 4 ounces by weight to 1 liter water. Then you'll get a 1040 gravity. You want to keep your starters between 1030 and 1040. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the water that's heating up. I would do it before you start getting a boil because you can have a boil over with this. The last thing you want to do is be trying to dump this in while the water's boiling. So get it, you know, when it's on its way up to boiling. I mean, you could put it in even when the water's cold, really, but just get it in there before the water gets too hot. The yeast nutrient. I just like to add it just for better insurance for yeast health, yeast growth. Anyways, this is 1 teaspoon per gallon. I'm just going to do half a teaspoon. You don't have to use it, but I like to use it. I mean, I don't know if it makes a huge difference. I'm not that smart. I don't know all the scientific stuff. I just figure it's not going to hurt it. So, just getting this up to a boil here. And you're going to get what you call a hot break on this. And basically, the proteins and everything inside of the dry malt extract are going to start to activate, get crazy, and you could, like I said, if you heat it up too quick, this can boil over on you really quick. So you can do one of two things. You can spray it with water or Star San. Don't use alcohol, obviously. You don't want that to come in contact with anything you're putting in your body, or you can just take the pot and lift it up off the one edge. That way the heat isn't getting put into the wort. So we'll let this come up to a boil here. Another thing is, when you get it coming up to a boil, you want to stir it. That way it helps cool the surface of the wort. That way it won't allow it to bubble over on you or get too crazy. So see right now how it's coming up? Take that off of there. I'm going to turn the stove down. And you want to stir it, because if you don't, you turn your back, you're going to have a big mess. So keep it tilted up, keep stirring it. Once this hot break starts to go away, you'll notice that these bubbles get a lot bigger. And I mean, it just won't foam up as much as it is right now. See, right now it's probably okay. Let's see if I can get away with it. Not yet. It's getting there. And the slower you heat it up, the better this will be. If you got like I have my burner turned all the way up and I'm putting all this heat into it, and all that heat's going to retain in the top of the stove, so it's going to take a minute for that to cool down. But if you heat the water slower, you're not going to have as big of a problem. So just go ahead and stir it. See, it should be about there. See how those bubbles are getting a little bit bigger? I don't know if you can see that or not, but I think it's about there. So this one's being a little wild today. Usually they're a little bit less crazy than this. So I got it boiling. What you want to do is, I would recommend boiling it for 10 minutes. Just to sterilize this wort. So we'll let it boil for 10 minutes and then we'll move on to the cooling cycle of it. Okay, so we took it off the stove, put the plug in the sink, set it in the sink. I have a lid on this. I would recommend always using a pot with a lid, because if you got, at least around here, we get a little bit of fruit flies in the summertime and weird stuff. So that way you just keep this wort safe, because it's boiled, it's sterilized. So anything from here on out needs to be sanitized that this wort touches. So we'll turn the sink on, get cold water here. I just fill it up, and I'll let this sit in here for probably 10-20 minutes. Then I'll drain it once, fill it back up, and it cools down pretty quick. So of course the bigger starters take longer than the smaller ones, but just make sure you got a lid in there, or lid on it. That way you're keeping it safe. And you can even sanitize the lid before you throw it on there. But I figure the heat, I put it on as it quits boiling, but the heat, I think, just kills anything that could potentially be on the lid. But, you know, obviously make sure everything you use is clean. So I'll just wait till it starts floating here. You know, in the summertime when our groundwater's hot too, I get the reusable cold packs and I throw them in there with it. And it just helps cool it down quicker. I could do that now, but I think I'll just let it sit there, and I'm going to sanitize the flask and get ready to transfer this into the flask and put it on the stir plate. So we got the wort cooling. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sanitize my flask. So that way, like I said earlier, anything that wort touches after you've sterilized it and boiled it needs to be sanitized. I was going to say earlier, you don't need a stir plate and all that stuff to make a yeast starter. You can use a growler. I just grabbed this jug just to have a visual presentation. But if you don't have a stir plate, you could just fill this jug up. I always use aluminum foil to put over the top of whatever my starter's in to keep any bugs or anything out. But if you put it in here, you can just stir it up, walk by it as much as you can and stir it. You want to introduce as much oxygen into that wort as you can while it's fermenting, because you're going to get better yeast growth out of it. So what I'm going to do is take this flask and inspect it, make sure it's clean. You know, anything that I wash with my brewing stuff, I use free and clear dish soap. because I don't want any aromas, any fragrance, anything like that inside of my brewing equipment. So I have everything I wash related to brewing. I just go out and buy something that's free and clear, generics. You don't need to. Just make sure it doesn't have any fragrance in it, especially if you're washing anything that's plastic or anything. So this flask is clean. I'm just going to take Star Sand here. If I can get it to work here, come on. And spray it down. Make sure I coat it evenly. Make a big mess. Have fun with it. So just kind of spray it down. I'll take the aluminum foil, spray it as well. Just put it over the top of it. Shake it up. Get it all in there. Make sure it's good to go. Then the little stir bar, I usually hit it with alcohol, just so that way I can kill anything that's on the stir bar. It's plastic. If there's a crack or a scratch in there, you can get something crazy going on. So just spray it with alcohol. I mean, if you use Star Sand, you'll be fine if you soak it in there. Rinse the alcohol, obviously. You don't want any of that in your beer. And I still spray it down with Star Sand here. Throw it in here. Try not to break it. And let that sit until the yeast or the wort's cooled down and ready to pitch. Okay, the wort is cooled. And our flask is sanitized. The funnel I have sanitized. I hit it with alcohol, I rinsed it with water, and I hit it with Star Sand. So, just want to dump this in here without making a huge mess. Make sure your stir plate or your stir bar is in there too. And let that sit in there and sanitize while you're waiting for the wort to cool. So, our level's a little bit low, which is normal, because we boiled off the water during the boil on the stove. So, I'm just going to fill it up with cold tap water. Make sure this is cold. It's going to get cold here. And just fill it up to that 1600 mark. You're not going to hurt anything by putting a little bit of water in there. And you want your gravity to be right, so put it on the stir plate here. Don't make fun of my stir plate. I made it 3 years ago, but it works really good. It's the ugliest stir plate in the world, but it does the job. So we're going to get it on the stir plate. I'm going to get the yeast. I'm just using Bavarian wheat yeast here, 3056. I'm making a Roggenbier. Never made a Roggenbier, so we'll see how it comes out. Get my scissors, hit them with alcohol, sterilize them. Sterilize my yeast with the alcohol. Rinse it all. Shake it up. Cut it open. Pour it in there. See if I have the stir bar in the right place. See if it stirs up. Can't tell. I think it is. Maybe not. So I gotta find the magnet on there. There it is. Put the aluminum foil back on the top of it. And I'll let this sit for at least 24 hours. I'm actually usually make it a couple days before brewing, but I didn't have time yesterday, so I'm going to brew in the morning, so it'll run for about 24 hours. And like I said, this is pretty much it for yeast starters. The biggest thing with making beer is yeast, so you always want to make sure you got a big healthy starter. I know you read people say it doesn't matter. I can assure you it matters. I love white yeast, white labs. If you do dry yeast, you really don't need to worry about starters. And you know, that's pretty much it. Just make sure your yeast, when you are gonna put it in your starter or make your starter, like this yeast pack I pulled out 3 hours ago, I activated it and let it warm up to room temperature. You don't want to dump cold yeast in there because you can shock the yeast, and it has more of a lag time. So that if you warm your yeast up to room temperature before you make a starter, you'll just get a healthier, I don't know about healthier, but you'll get a more active, robust starter than you would if you dump cold yeast in there, because it's got to wake up and you can shock it. So thank you all for watching. You can follow me on Instagram at Patchworx Brewing, and I also have a website. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Cheers, everybody. Thanks.